Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Stemshorn, and I work as a program coordinator at the City of Toronto's Environment and Energy Division. I'm very excited for this webinar today titled "'Tis the Season to Be Eco" with Sophi Robertson, who you might know on Instagram as your eco friend. That's her handle. So this webinar is a part of Live Green Toronto's Live Green at Home series and over the last 12 webinars, we've really done it all. We've cooked delicious meals, we've fixed bikes, we've even learned about solar panels, just to name a few inspiring actions that the Live Green at Home series has explored. So visit the Live Green Toronto YouTube page to check out the recordings and past webinars. Our webinar today is all about creative reuse and the sharing economy. With these individual actions, we are reducing our levels of consumption and working towards Toronto's climate action strategy, Transform TO, and the accelerated goals of the net zero strategy. Through reuse, waste reduction, and the sharing economy, we are offering respect to the land we call home. So with this in mind, I'd like to start the workshop with a land acknowledgement. Today, we acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We will be recording this webinar for anyone interested in rewatching or sharing with friends at a later date. Those who have registered for this webinar will be sent a link to the recording of the webinar via email. It'll also be posted to the Live Green Toronto YouTube page for anyone to view. For optimal viewing experience, I encourage you to, on the top right-hand corner of your window, you should see a little box that says Layout. I encourage you to select Stack View. That way you'll see the most of our presenters' presentation as well as the demo that is included in this webinar. So also throughout the presentation, I encourage you to type in your questions in the question and answer box within the right side of your WebEx window. It says Q&A. So we've reserved some time at the end for questions. I encourage you to ask questions throughout the entire webinar, as in the event we do have time to fit in your questions within Sophi's presentation. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Sophi Robertson. Since 2016, Sophi has mindfully led a low waste lifestyle. And in 2019, Sophi was the Toronto Public Library's environmentalist in residence. You can follow, as I mentioned earlier, you can follow along with Sophi's low waste lifestyle adventures through her social media account at Your Eco Friend. I can say from my personal experience, I'm a longtime follower and admirer of Sophi. And I can say I've taken so many sustainable lifestyle tips away from Sophi's account and adventures. So Sophi's great energy, enthusiasm, and even her great dance moves to promote a happy and healthy lifestyle. So I'll stop raving about Sophi and pass things over to you. On to you, Sophi.
Thanks so much, Kim. That was very kind of you. Okay, hello. Yes, I do occasionally dance online. Just it's easier to dance when nobody's watching / everyone ends up watching. But anyway, okay, I'm just going to open up my presentation and we can get started. All right. Here I am. Okay, how do I move this thing? I usually use Zoom. Let's see. There we go. Nope, that's not it. Oh, goodness. It always starts this way, doesn't it? Okay. Kim, how do I move the thing in front of my presentation?
Yeah. So do you see on the bottom middle right-hand side, there's a little share. Actually, you're sharing, so that's good.
Yes, I am
you
sharing.
need to select,
oh
yeah,
go.
You should be able to just select the tab.
There we go.
Beauty.
There was something in the way. Okay. It's not a good presentation unless there's some kind of tech difficulties. Am I right? And by that, I
We're
mean my
authentic here.
view. I swear I've done this before. Okay, so 'tis the season to be eco. I really love this one. We're going to go over a bunch of different ways to reduce waste, which also end up saving money as well often. And kind of one of my favorite parts is the gift wrapping and how to do that without any waste and reusing stuff you might have lying around. All right, so I'll just do a quick intro to kind of let you know how I started my journey to trying to be more mindful about my waste. So as Kim mentioned, I've been trying to do this for, I guess, 5 years now. And it was all because I had heard a stat about coffee cups and how many coffee cups go to landfill in a day in Toronto. And I don't know if you've heard this before, but this stat is actually probably over 10 years old now. So unfortunately, probably a little bit higher. But anyway, the number was still quite staggering, and that number was 1 million. So I was shocked. 1 million items for 1 million for one item in one day in one city. That just really took me by surprise. So I thought, okay, well, what can I do about this? I need to be able to be more mindful and reduce my impact. So I started to do some research and found people living a zero waste lifestyle. And I thought, what the heck is that? It sounds really extreme. And when I got to researching, I realized, oh, it's just people trying to reduce their waste. Well, that sounds great. So I got to it and started following people online and watching documentaries and reading books. And pretty soon I was quite passionate about it. And so much so that I gave up my business of 16 years and career as a massage therapist to do this full time, talking to lovely people like yourselves and being able to share ideas on how we can be better stewards. So here we are. Whoa, that is not the next page. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're going to go over a few different areas. That'll be decorations, parties, travel, gift ideas, and gift wrapping. So those would be kind of the main areas that we're going to cover today. And as I mentioned, the gift wrapping part will be where I kind of show you how to do different techniques with cloth. Okay, so the first part, decorations. You don't need to go out to any shops to do any of your decorating. Honestly, most of the stuff that I decorate now is with stuff that I find in nature, whether it be pine cones, greenery, branches, and then, lots of cardboard. And there's something I'm going to show you in the next slide of how to create a little winter village with jars. We all have like maybe pickle jars, mayo jars, all those kind of jars. Instead of recycling them, we can decorate them. And here's just a little example of something that my daughter and I did. Like, these are some pine cones, and this took no time at all. It was just a bit of glue on the top of the pine cone and dipped it in salt, and some branches from outside, some little greenery. So that's just a really quick way to decorate. And now I have it done for next year. And then the other example with the cardboard, this is an example of something my daughter did, and we're going to put this kind of on the back of our kind of media unit and have that as kind of like the village and light it up. So that's just using, old cardboard, shipping boxes, all that stuff. You can also use, do the popcorn garland, some dried oranges. I did that with an old grapefruit that was kind of going off. It didn't turn out quite as pretty as it did online, but nonetheless, I tried. And I also did some white clay ornaments that I heard about online. Also didn't turn out quite as well as I would have liked and as pretty as it did online, but it was fun. It was just a couple of ingredients. So some fun stuff to do too. And then if you aren't necessarily into doing any DIY or don't have any of that stuff at home, you can definitely find things at secondhand shops, swap some stuff on buns. There's buy nothing groups on Facebook. There's Kijiji, Facebook Marketplace, Poshmark. All those places have a ton of different decorations for the holidays and for any kind of holiday, really. And then for trees, so we came across an interesting way to dispose of our real tree last year, and that was kind of a random thing, actually quite random, which is we found out that goats really like Christmas trees. So we had a friend who had a family member who had goats. So I don't know, maybe you have one of those too. And we brought the tree to the goats, and that ended up being a really fun experience for our family too. But the city of Toronto also will pick up your trees between a certain date, and then I believe that they make them into wood chips for ground cover and landscaping around the city. Okay, so, oh yeah, and here's actually, I'll explain these pictures. These are just a few things that we had picked up. You saw the goats down below, and here where you see the pine cone, that is actually just a few different things like bird seeds and some greenery and a pine cone in the middle. And then we laid some string across it, put some water in, and then put it in a little container and put it in the freezer. And then we had an ornament that we could put outside on a tree. And then the other things are ways to use jars. You can use old tinsel, maybe even old wrapping paper. You could use like here's some greenery with just like a tea light. It looks really pretty. It's another way to use a jar. There's so many different ways where you don't necessarily have to be like crafty at all. Okay, here is the example that I was talking about that I will play, and I will mute as well. Okay, here we go. So this is just a really great way to reuse jars. So you can actually, the link will be in a resource provided at the end or emailed to you for anyone who registered. Yeah, you can download the template if you're not necessarily artsy. I might do this myself because I don't think it would turn out quite as nice as that. And then you can cut it out and or don't have to necessarily cut it out. You can put it inside like this one. They're going to show you a couple different ways, and then you can trace it. I'm just going to make this go a little bit faster. There we go. So you can trace it with a Sharpie, and then you're left with the actual drawing on the jar. And then they use Mod Podge. Honestly, I think I would just use white glue myself, just because that's what I have on hand. If you have any glitter, you can do that. You could also use salt. That would work too, you know, for keeping with what we have in the house. If you don't want to do that way, you can cut out the stencil and actually glue it right onto the jar. This is quite lovely too. So there are the two different ways. And then I thought this was really brilliant is using toothpicks and dip them in paint to make it look snowy. And then painting the scenery black so it's more of like a silhouette look. And then isn't that lovely? And then you do it once and then you have it for, you know, years and years to come. So there's just another way to reuse stuff that you have at home. Okay, so now we're going to move on to parties. So there's a lot of different, well, the exciting part is that we actually have parties this year, which is great. So there's a few different things. You can see a couple of photos there. The top one is me trying on a bunch of different fun outfits at Fitzroy Rentals, which is near Bloor and Lansdowne, I believe, if they're still in that location. I believe they are. So that's if you're going to like a fancy event and you want something new, but you don't necessarily want to spend the money. This is a great way to reduce kind of things that you might not wear more than once. You can just rent it. And then there's a lot of ugly Christmas sweater parties too. Honestly, in the picture you see below is me at one of those parties. And instead of buying one of those sweaters, which you can do at a lot of secondhand shops, there's so many different really fun, ugly sweaters. And they're usually way cooler, in my opinion, and nicer looking than the ones that are new. Because I don't know, the vintage vibe of it is kind of fun. Or you can just grab one of your sweaters and pin a bunch of different Christmas decorations on it. That's what I did. And that was really fun. I just tried, wrapping paper, bows, pencil, all that different stuff. And then it's a sweater that you're always wearing anyway, and just take it off afterwards. So that's another way. For servingware, so reusable servingware is definitely ideal rather than disposable, whether you're hosting or attending. So if you're attending, I've definitely done this before. Actually, I think I've done this at a party with Kim before. I showed up with my own reusable servingware because I understand that that's not for everyone, but I didn't make a thing of it. I just knew it was going to be a party with a lot of people, and for simplicity's sake, disposables are what was opted for. So I just brought my own, and I had a bag to put it in afterwards. And some people didn't notice, and some people did, and we were able to have a nice chat about why I was doing that. So that's an option if you feel comfortable doing that. You can also rent or borrow servingware, decor, and games from friends, neighbors. Again, buns. The Toronto Tool Library, I know, has servingware and like party games and stuff too. And if you have like frequent events, if you're hosting a lot, consider purchasing some secondhand servingware. You can usually find a lot of that in different thrift shops. And for snacks, we have so many different bulk options in Toronto in particular. I mean, of course, Bulk Barn, and then there's lots of small businesses that offer purchasing snacks and food in general in your own containers. So that can be done as well, and then you're not left with all the extra waste from the food packaging. And that will be in the resource at the end as well, with all the different shops around the city. Oops. I don't know why it went back. Okay. Now for travel, that's something that some of us might be doing this year to see family, maybe to get away. So there's different options for trying to minimize your impact when you're traveling as well. There's something called carbon offsets, and that was always a bit confusing to me. Basically, the idea is you can calculate, and this you can do, you just search online, they calculate carbon offsetting, and you put in your travel, whether it be flying or driving, whatever the case, and you will be told how much carbon you are emitting by taking that trip. And it might even go further as to say, like, what are you planning to do there and all of that stuff. But if you're just looking at the actual travel miles, it will let you know. Now, there are options where you can pay a company to offset that travel. those travel miles. And what that means is you are paying a company that invests in other companies that are doing things sustainably. So whether it's planting trees, whether it's renewable energy, whatever the case. You may have more control over in some companies than others. But I was always a little uneasy with this just because I never really knew exactly where my money was going. So I've opted out of that and kind of done my own, where I would figure out my impact and then I would invest in the communities where I was going. So whether that meant, I would financially give money to organizations that were doing great things in those local areas, or I would do a lot of litter pickups while I was there. I was on the beach and just grab stuff. Lots of different options there. Maybe volunteer if you actually are away for long enough and you have a little bit of time, things like that. So that's how I end up trying to offset my travel. And then other ways are flying direct will reduce your impact. Packing lighter. So if we all packed a little bit lighter, then that would also reduce the carbon footprint. And if you can cycle, walk, or take public transit while you're traveling, that's ideal. And supporting the local economy where you are. So that looks like, staying with the smaller hotels or homestays, or eating at the local small family restaurants, stuff like that, to help the local economy. Okay, gift ideas. So we're all inundated with gifts and feeling probably a little bit overwhelmed with that. So my first thing that I always talk about is give them what they want and what they need. Whether, maybe it's not something that you would feel comfortable with yourself, but if it's something that someone else wants and they're going to actually use it, then ultimately that's the most sustainable because they're actually going to use it and it's not just going to sit there and it wasn't just something that was purchased kind of frivolously. Maybe it's something you like, but maybe it's not something they like. I've definitely been guilty of that myself. So what does that look like? Other than, if it's not what they want or need, or they don't like to maybe give you that list. I know there's, that kind of takes a bit of the surprise element out. Lots of different options. There's homemade food and DIY gifts and experiences, gift certificates to a bookstore, an ice cream shop, subscription to an online streaming service, or donation to their favorite charity if it's someone who doesn't necessarily want anything for themselves. Experience gifts can be like going out for a hike or a nice dinner together, attending a workshop or a fun class together. Homemade items like cookies, infused cooking oils. That was something I did a couple years ago, which was actually much simpler than I expected. Just, often it's throwing a couple cloves of garlic in some oil and maybe a couple of herbs and letting it sit for a couple weeks and throw it in a nice bottle with a tag that was made just for them. It feels really special. Plants, often you can propagate from plants you already have and put them into a new pot. This homemade body butter, I think I put a link to making that if you are so inclined. It's quite lovely. Bath salts, I mean, often bath salts is just like Epsom salts and a bit of oil in a nice jar, and that's it. Like new secondhand finds. So, okay, so here's something a lot of people are kind of like side-eyeing me, like, what, you're gonna get secondhand gifts for someone? Are you cheap? Like, it's not about that. It's just about trying to reduce buying new and that demand for more extracted from the planet, right? So there's lots of stuff already out there. People have been gifted things that they never use, never really wanted. So you can find those online at all the places that I mentioned before. And the person receiving it doesn't have to know. So here you'll see in this picture, we reused an egg carton and made some little chocolate balls. And then my daughter just kind of covered the egg carton with her own art, and her friend really loved it. All right, so here's the exciting part of doing the gift wrapping. So gift wrapping with Furoshiki, so it's actually a Japanese word, which means bath spread. And it originated in the Muromachi period, a very long time ago. And the cloths were actually widely used in bathhouses to wrap clothes to keep them dry, and also used as a bath mat. And over time, they developed many different uses for them and patterns, and some of them are just absolutely gorgeous. So I'm borrowing some of those techniques, but I use, rather than the actual kind of designated like furoshiki cloth wrapping, I am using, old scarves and mostly scarves is what I use, but I also use, like, this is some old scrap fabric that I don't even, I mean, this is really quick, but I don't even like mend the material. I just cut it, and then just cut off the little strings, and make sure it looks nice for giving. But it is something that you can do with stuff that you have lying around the house that you don't know what you're going to do with. Maybe it's that unfinished sewing project, whatever the case. Sometimes it just doesn't get done, right? So there's lots of different options for these techniques. Today we're going to do it for gift wrapping. You can do it for shopping. So I often use, don't mind me for a second. I use some of these techniques to wrap my food sometimes. I've been to the grocery store where I didn't have a produce bag, a reusable produce bag with me, and I prefer not to use the plastic ones if I can avoid it. So I typically always have a cloth napkin with me, and I use that technique to wrap some tomatoes so that they wouldn't get bruised on my way home. So that was really easy to do. I did it right at the cash. Got some funny looks, but then some like, oh, interesting. So you can do that. You can decorate a handbag. You can wrap your lunch in it. You can use it for household decor, a scarf, belt, or bandana, for wrapping clothes when traveling. Like, I don't know what they call those, travel cubes, I guess. To keep kind of outfits together. You can do that. So lots of different options for using cloth. So why do we do this? Well, we're doing this so that we can avoid creating waste that often ends up in landfill or the waterways. And wrapping with cloth is actually a really sustainable and creative way to add a unique touch for any gift. So say you're going to a housewarming, and bottle of wine is often a common thing to give. Well, you could get them a nice tea towel, a nice large tea towel, and wrap the wine bottle with the tea towel. So that kind of becomes another part of gift. Or you're going to a baby shower and you can wrap the I don't know, whatever the gift is, in a receiving blanket. So it becomes a really fun way to gift. And I will show you how to do the wrapping on the wine bottle. That will be our first wrapping. And then reuse or upcycle is always better than recycling, because recycling is about, you have to break down an item to make a new item. And with that it comes with a lot of air pollution and carbon. So if you're just reusing or upcycling, you're just shifting whatever that intended use was, and you actually end up lengthening the life of that item. And any questions at any point, feel free to throw them out. Kim will let me know when there's any questions there. Okay, so wrapping paper. So here are a couple of stats. Now this is an American stat, but it's pretty much exactly the same here. So Americans actually throw away an extra 25 million tons of garbage over the holidays, which is about 1 million extra tons per week. Ugh. And it's estimated that each Canadian throws out 50 kilos of waste over the holidays. Aye. So just in case you didn't already know, the majority of wrapping paper is now made with mixed materials. So what does that mean? It means there might look like paper, but if it has anything shiny in it, it has foil in it, potentially plastic. Often it does have plastic. And if it's mixed materials like that, it can't be recycled in Toronto. It's just too challenging to do that. So if you do want to wrap with paper, you can reuse that craft paper that comes in your shipping boxes or that tissue paper. You can wrap with that stuff. Maybe LCBO paper bags, turn them inside out. You can wrap with that stuff if you're not down with the cloth wrapping that we're going to do. But I'm pretty sure you're going to like it because you're here. Okay, so cloth wrapping. So the benefits of it saves time, or sorry, saves items from being sent to landfill, as I mentioned before. And it's often simpler and more cost effective than using wrapping paper, tape, and ribbon. I've been reusing a lot of these cloth wrappings for, gosh, years now. Sometimes this is a question I often get asked is, well, what do I do? What if someone doesn't want to take it, or how should I present it? You can always put a little card on the gift. I guess it depends on who it is that you're gifting to and how comfortable you are with them. But you can always attach a card that says, why you're using cloth wrapping. If they would like to, that this is part of their gift, but they're welcome to give it back if they don't think they'll reuse it or gift it to someone else. So that's a really easy way to just kind of have that simple conversation. And oh, yep.
Yeah, it just popped up.
Yeah.
In the question and answer panel, someone actually was asking this very thing, Sophie. So I'm so glad you're addressing this, because it's this whole understanding of why we're wrapping it in reusable materials rather than using single-use wrapping paper. So yeah, this person asked, like, their friends don't tend to typically catch on as to why they're doing this act and going through over and above to wrap it this way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess they're asking here, well, they're commenting that they do it in their home with their immediate family, but they find they can't outside of that environment. Do you have any suggestions on how I love this, and maybe that's a start with the little card that explains why we're doing this, but are there any other tips you can provide this attendee on how they can inform their friends without without overwhelming them or making them feel uncomfortable?
Yeah, I guess it depends on whether that kind of worry is coming from yourself, potentially like the fear that you're thinking that you're trying to impose your kind of sustainability goals on someone else, or is it actually them saying they don't want their gifts like that? So I understand and kind of relate to the first part, which is like, I don't want anyone to think that I'm like trying to lecture them or anything like that. And so with that, I just gift people in that way. And it is extremely rare that people would throw away cloth versus wrapping paper. There's just there's just a difference. So, wrapping paper, we just get used to like crumpling it up and throwing it away. Cloth, for someone who's just like, it's their first time getting it wrapped in cloth, they get it and they're like, oh, interesting. And then they take it off and they're like, what do you want me to do, to do with this? Is often what I'll get if I don't let them know. And I just say, oh, it's, you can keep it if you think you'll wrap with it again, but I'm happy to take it back. I just use the cloth over and over again to just reduce waste. And usually people are like, oh, here you go. And they nicely fold it up and give it back to me. So it depends, I guess, on, is it people that are saying they don't want it that way, which I would say would be not as common. But that's how I have dealt with it. And it actually has happened where I've had well, she's like almost 85 now, I think. My husband's aunt, who I love, she's the coolest. But she's not like, she's not on the, I love her, but we're not necessarily the same in terms of like, I think about sustainability like all the time, right? But when I gave her things that were wrapped this way, she was like, oh, that's very interesting. And she actually ended up asking me if I could teach her. So I did. And now she gives things that way. So it just depends on who the person is. If it's someone who's not necessarily maybe going to be open to doing it that way, I wouldn't even say anything. It's just like nobody usually says anything about how you wrap a gift, right? So yeah, that's kind of my tips. Hopefully that helps. But feel free to add anything else if you have any other questions. So yeah, the wrapping can be an additional or useful gift for the recipient. As I mentioned before, it's multi-purpose. And if we're using natural materials like silk and cotton, they can be compostable in backyard compost. That is unfortunately not compostable though in the city green bin. So don't put them in the green bin. Okay. Next one. All right. So we've gotten to the part where we actually wrap. Okay, let's do it. Are there any other questions, Kim, before I move on? I'm going to say if I don't see your face.
No, that's good.
Okay. Okay, cool. All right. So I'm just going to make sure that you can see me. So I'm going to do the wine first. Do this. I think this one is good. Okay. So I think when I do it virtually, not many people are actually doing it themselves at home. So, but if you are, oh, yep.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you mind stopping your screen share?
Oh,
so
yes,
we can get
thank you.
A full picture?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, there we go. Now I can see myself better too. So now I can see your angle. Okay. So what you're going to do, if you are doing this with me, you're going to place your cloth in a diagonal shape. So you want one of the corners pointing at you. And then you're going to put your wine bottle back in the center. And you're going to grab the piece that's furthest away from you and the piece that's closest from you. And you're going to bring them up and tie it. Now, what I would recommend, so there's a lot of different types. The lighter it is, the easier it is to wrap. Like this one would be harder this is a much thicker material. It's still totally doable, obviously, but not as easy for something like a wine bottle. So this one's nice because it's a really light cotton. You can do it with a silky material too. It's going to be more slinky and like maybe like fall down a little bit. But once you get used to doing this, you can do it with pretty much anything. Okay, so I've just tied it on top, kind of tight, but I didn't do a knot. You can do a knot, that's fine too. But I didn't. So I'm taking the tails on the sides, and this is the trickiest part, which is not that tricky, but you're gonna bring them away from you, and then you're gonna cross them over, and you're going to bring it down to kind of the midpoint of the bottle. So you don't want it around the neck, okay? And you have it crossed over, and you're going to bring it tight to the front. And if there's any kind of bulkiness, you can twist those. Now I'm really going overboard with like explaining every little detail, but once you get used to this, it doesn't take a lot of time, and you'll be a pro. So we've twisted those, and now we're just going to tie a knot at the front, you see? And we're almost done. Okay, so I'm doing double knot, and then you can make it floofier. That is the technical term. Here, and make it extra pretty. So there you go. There's that part done. Now you can leave it that way, or I like to do twisties, swirlies, and then you do a little handle. There you go. So that's for a wine bottle. Now normally that would take you, I did 8 bottles. Is there a question? No? Okay.
Well, no, keep going. I want to see the finished demo of this, but there is a question that I will follow up with.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead. I was just gonna, I don't know.
I feel like I would love, so that's actually a handle on top that you can hold it with. Wow.
Yep. Yeah, so yeah.
And wine bottles are heavy, so that's like a strong, like, was there an art to getting the right tension and figuring out weight to?
So yeah, you want to make sure that it's in the middle is the main part, and then like when I pull the tails here, you want to pull it quite taut, and when you cross it over again, you're gonna pull it quite taut. But even like, I'm trying to think, have I ever? So this is where maybe a less silky one would be more ideal until you get used to it, at least, because I guess it could definitely come out, but I haven't had it happen yet where anything has fallen out. And I just did this for my husband, who is a craft beer rep, and he gives bottles to his customers at Christmas, and so I always insist that he doesn't buy any bows and all of that stuff, and just that I wrap them. And I did it last night, and like, I don't know, I did 8 bottles in a few minutes. Like, it's really fast. So yeah, and I haven't had any issues with it. Yeah.
That's great. So the question we received is about size of fabric. So do you have any, someone has fabric that they have scrap fabric pieces that they want to upcycle, so reuse for this purpose, but they don't know what size to cut it, and they want to reuse them every year. And then they also want to, wrap gifts that are different sizes. So any suggestions on people looking to upcycle their fabric?
Yeah, so I would recommend 20 by 20 inches for something maybe a bit smaller. If you're looking for wine, it would be typically around 30 by 30.
And that was inches, you said?
Yes, in inches. Yeah. But again,
and do you actually take a ruler to measure it? Like you're being that precise?
No, I only know that because I've been asked that. But like, I've never, like, once you start, if you go out and buy stuff, you'll notice that they are typically, like, this is a larger one, like I think it's 30 by 30. You'll start to recognize the sizing, but if you are using stuff you have at home, which is awesome, I've never, I don't even measure. Like, I don't know. I don't like directions. I don't like have to. I like taking.
Yeah, stifles creativity a bit.
I like taking stuff out because I feel like the more steps that I have, then it's less likely that I'll do something. But having said that, I understand that, having instructions and recipes to things is also helpful. So yeah, I would say 30 by 30 is your best bet.
Perfect. And someone's asking, do you recommend square cuts or round for the fabric?
So I wouldn't recommend round. That's probably the only shape that I have not done. It's very rare that I come across that. But I'd take that challenge. But I have definitely done like scarves that are weird shapes, like more like actual like long rectangular stuff. I tried to do it last night with the wine bottle, and I was like, I don't know, I'm afraid it's gonna fall out. So I didn't want to do that, but I have done it with other things before, where I just kind of like wrapped it up and then tied a bow at the top, and it works out fine. So it just depends on
Great.
the shape of what you're wrapping.
And Sophie, we've had a few requests in the Q&A. Do we have time to see that demo once again? People felt like, I think we have some folks following along, and someone specifically asked for a demo of the handle, because they might have missed that element.
For sure. Yeah, no problem. We definitely have time. We still have, and like, because we're taking questions as we go too, I'm assuming we're okay for time, leaving time at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I can even pepper in some of these questions as you're wrapping if you're comfortable with that.
Oh yeah, of course.
There were some questions.
Okay, so you're doing, the important thing with this one is that you're doing it on a diagonal. So not like this, but turning it like a diamond shape, right? So you have one corner facing you. And this one's actually great because, as you can see, there's actually a circle right in the middle. So I just pop it right in the middle. And this can be done with mason jars as well. So if you're like gifting, well, this is not what I would be gifting, but like if you're gifting, like, I don't know, homemade cookies or something like that, and you want to wrap it, you can do that. Or here's another thing you can do is old wrapping paper, just cut out a circle and just put it on top and make it like festive that way. Lots of different ways to do that. Back to the wrapping. So I'm going to take the top corner, the one that's furthest away from you, and the one that's closest from you to you. So you're going to bring them up, and you're just going to, now again, it doesn't really matter. You could so I just tied it once over. You could do a knot if you're worried if it's like sliding around a lot. You could do a knot, that's no problem. And so now you're left with this. Okay, so these are your tails, your wings, whatever you want to call them, and you bring it out in front of you, or yeah, I mean, yes, not towards you, away from you. And so you have your two corners, and you're just gonna cross over. Okay, so you have this and just cross them over. Okay, so the good thing, the main thing is you don't want to have it up here. You don't want to have it down here. You want to have it kind of straight out as much as possible. I'm like looking at my nails, like, wow, you really got a first good look. I'm like, are they okay? Okay, so then you cross it over, and you're bringing it really as tight as you can. Okay, so this is where I'm going to bring it to. So this is where I crossed it over. And if it's a bit like you have a lot of excess fabric, you can twirl it to kind of make it even tighter. And this is where you tie it. Okay, so you nice and tight. And this is where I do like the double knot. And so now you're left with that. And this is the fluffing part, but that's not the part you're as interested in. So let's go back to the top. So this is the top. I did do the double knot, but you don't have to. So you have that, and you're just twirling it so that you make it a little bit easier to be more of like an actual handle. And in the very tips is what I usually do. and I just tie a knot. So I do a double knot there. And that's your handle.
Do you find the fabric, like, is it challenging to undo the knots? I saw you do it sort of as you were talking. It seemed to come apart. Are there some fabrics that come apart easier than others?
I mean, yeah, the silky ones would come apart more easily, but like this one is ideal for the wine bottle. So yeah, this is a really light kind of gauzy, you can see through it, material. So if you're going with that, but honestly, I just go based on, is it kind of easily malleable to wrap with, and the pattern and the size. Like I look at it and I'm like, is it big enough? Like, because I've had to do these workshops back when I did it in person back in the day. I used to source, I'd have to do a lot, so I didn't have enough to like scrap materials at home. So I would go out and buy them at secondhand shops, and I do put that in the that is in the resource list where I recommend to get them.
And we received a question asking about like certain fabrics. So you did mention sort of like silky is a bit more difficult, or I don't know if it's more difficult to use, but you recommend something thicker. Someone's asking specifically, like for instance, is cotton easier to work with than silk?
I mean, it depends on what you're wrapping. If it's something that's more intricate, like I'm going to show you another one, and I'll show you, how about I show you with like a more kind of gauzy, silky like material, and then you can see like it's not more difficult. Like it's actually still easy to do, but it's like when I was saying difficult with the wine bottle, it's just because you're going to be carrying it. That's the only thing. But I have done it with silky materials, and it's not a problem. It's just maybe when you're first starting. So are we good? I want to make sure that I can show you another one, but I'm happy to answer any other questions. We good?
Yeah, why don't we just proceed forward with another one, and then we'll save the last like couple minutes for any additional questions that roll into the Q&A.
Sure. Okay, so Baby Yoda, that's the thing. So if you want to wrap little Baby Yoda, but you don't have a box, no problem. We're gonna do, this is a super versatile one. I have a cat, so you might see me keep doing this. Okay, we're gonna wrap Baby, and how we're gonna do this, you're gonna see this one's much more silky and like gauzy and airy and whatnot. And this time I am laying it out with the straight edge. I love that some of you are actually doing this. This is great. So you see the straight edge, okay? I'm going to put the item right in the middle. So these are for odd shaped items. This is what I use for when I'm doing my groceries and I forget my reusable produce bag. This is the wrap that I've done as well. So it's definitely multi-purpose, or for your lunch, whatever the case. So I'm starting on the left. You don't have to, but you can follow along. You got to start on one side. So grab the top and bottom corner, and you're just going to do one loop over, not a knot, but just a loop. Okay, so now you have a tail in front of you or away from you, and one in front of you. And now you're going to go to the other side. You're going to do the same thing. Okay, so just one loop, and you're going to do that right down to whatever item it is that you're wrapping. Okay, so now you have two tails at the top and two tails at the bottom. Okay, so you got four tails. So I'm going to take the two tails that are furthest from me, and we're going to do just a knot with the very tips of that of those tails. Okay, we have a knot there, and we're going to do the exact same thing on this side. And you're going to see in a moment, your mind is going to be blown. and I can't wait for you to try this at your Christmas parties, your holiday parties, and all your parties to come. Okay, so we've done it. Check it out. Look, isn't that so cute? So you can, so it's kind of like, so this one I would say is a little large. I think this one was a 30.
Sorry, Sophie, your audio, I don't know if there's a piece of fabric maybe covering your microphone, but it got a bit muffled there.
Oh no, can you hear me okay now?
Yes, that's
Oh,
better.
okay. I think I just got too excited. So the reveal. So the exciting part of this is that this doesn't have to be undone to open it. You just put your fingers in it and just open it up. And look at baby Yoda's in there. So this is how I do my lunch or my reusable bag or whatever the case. So you've got something if you want. But you see how quick that was, and that was with a demo. Yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free. I can also show you another one of my favorites real quick if you want.
Yeah, why don't you show one more? But while you're doing that, are these particular folds detailed on the handout that you had a slide of that you'll also be linking everyone to?
Yeah, so exactly. Yeah, this will be in the resource. So there's one thing, when I started talking about Furoshiki, you saw like all the different techniques. That will be in your handout, which has everything except for this one. But I have put this into the resource with pictures and everything. So you'll be able
great.
to
And a reminder is folks can also watch the webinar recording to revisit the wrap Sophie's doing here.
Yeah, so this one, okay, so the next one is if you have two things that are similar size. So you say you're giving books, or I used to say CDs or DVDs, but like that doesn't even happen anymore. Two records. I don't know. So you can use this wrapping. So you're gonna do the diamond shape again. So you see that I put the diamond, so one corner is towards you. I want to make sure I do this fast enough so we don't go over time. But you're putting your books on the edges. I'm using books, whatever your items. They basically have to be two similar sized, like right angled items. So you're putting them kind of towards the end, but you're leaving a little bit of the tip exposed. So like that, okay? And you're going to flip them towards one another. This might be a little sloppy, but that's okay. That's what I love about the cloth wrapping is it's also very forgiving. So you just keep flipping them. Now this is the important part here. They have to come in. Oh, look at that. That worked out nice. They have to come in like butting up against one another. If they're not butting up, then just kind of pull it out and give it a little bit of space and then make sure that it's then butting up. So this is butting up. You're going to turn it around so that the angle, the line is horizontal. And you've got the two tails, okay, right and left. You're going to bring them up and you're going to do that fancy crossover that we did with the wine bottle, but now you're doing it with these items. Okay, so you're crossing it over, bring it right down to the items. Now, this is the important part too. You're going to bring them right over to where the books join or whatever items join. Okay, and this is the exciting part, people. Gotta be watching. Okay, this is where you flip it and look at it. Isn't this gorgeous? I love this one so much. This is how I won a room full of kids who were not impressed until I did this. And then they were like, yeah. So, yeah. So this is really
I'll share the enthusiasm. It's like a little purse, little bag.
Yeah. So all the kids were super into it. I was like, thank goodness, because that was rough. But yeah, so this is something you can do with like photo frames, you know, whatever kind of right angled items you have. Okay, we still have like a minute for questions.
Yeah, taking us away from the gift wrapping, we received a question about the video you showed with the mason jar and
Yeah,
the scenery picture on it. Someone's asking, do you know what material they used to dab with the toothpicks? So that white, maybe it was a paint? Was it an
I think
acrylic
it was
paint?
just paint. I believe it was just like a regular paint. Yeah.
Perfect. Yes.
Mhm.
Acrylic paint is pretty easy to find too at your local craft stores. Well, this has been so amazing, Sophie. I just maybe I'll ask one question here to sort of cap us off and send us off to our busy days. But community seems to be a huge thread in the low waste lifestyle. You've mentioned so many community groups, whether it's like online marketplaces where people resell things, and it seems to be very, very informal. So it's not necessarily going to a store or a business. Do you have any suggestions for people who are looking to take up and embrace the zero waste lifestyle or low waste lifestyle, I should say, and how they can find a community of their own?
Yeah, well, if anyone's on Facebook, the Zero Waste Toronto Facebook page, which I did put the link in that for the resources, that's a great place. And I think they often just, if you just go into the search bar, you don't even have to ask questions often because it's such a huge group now. I think there's like 14,000 people in it. So it's a great resource if you have any questions about where to source things, just pop it into the search bar and you'll probably find a bunch of different threads on that. So that's probably the best place for people in Toronto. It's I'm just thinking those who might not be on Facebook. Libraries are great. I have found so many different resources through the library. It's so much more than just books, as you know. But I didn't actually know that a number of years ago. I didn't realize how much was actually accessible through there from workshops and beyond.
That's great. And we did receive a question earlier about how we can go zero waste or low waste through books. So that's a great suggestion there. Walked right into that question. So thanks for
Nice.
mentioning that. Our library systems, the original zero waste folks.
Oh, seriously.
So yeah. So well, with that, we'll conclude our Tis the Season to Be Eco workshop. The inspiration and fun doesn't have to end here. I encourage you to learn more about how you can reuse and reduce the waste you produce by following Sophie with her handle, Your Eco Friend. So YOURECO friend. A big thank you to my colleagues, Candice Keast and Adam Tesfaye, who organized this webinar. A recording of this webinar will be sent via email to those that registered for the event. We'll also post this webinar to the Live Green Toronto YouTube page for additional viewing. So I know many of you were folding along for the gift wrapping component of this workshop. Feel free to revisit that link when we post it to our YouTube page. Look out for it tomorrow or maybe on Monday. It'll be there for you to revisit and share with your friends and family. So thanks so much, everyone. Big thank you to Sophi Robertson, your eco-friend, my eco-friend, everyone's eco-friend, for attending this webinar and sharing your knowledge. Hope everyone has a great day. Thank you so much. Bye now.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Kim. Thanks, everyone. Take care.